Babysitter. I'm a terrible writer, so please bear with me. I'm just here to see what the people of Reddit think of this situation. I was pretty hesitant to post this in the first place. Little boring backstory. My mother had me at the young age of 19 and was very proactive to ensure that she gave me the best upbringing possible. So she worked her ass off, had her own apartment, her own car, paid bills on time, and catered to every need I had as an infant until I had to fly the coop. She's pretty amazing, and so is my family. Both my father and mother's side of the family were there whenever my mom needed someone to watch me, when she had to go to work, but sometimes not all schedules aligned and had to resort to hiring babysitters. I was told that she posted some flyers in popular places and cafes to get a larger audience in hopes of someone contacting her, and which to her surprise she received some feedback and hired a wonderful girl named Rachel. Sounds pretty casual and anticlimactic to some, including myself. I always ask how I was as a child, some funny stories, memorable moments, etc. I don't know why, I'm just that type of person who loves detail and will ask questions to grasp emotions and depths to any story, especially those I'm interested in. But to my surprise, I found out that the process of finding a babysitter was much more difficult and unsettling, to say the least. I didn't find this out until I was in high school, 3 years ago when I was in my junior year, after a volleyball game I was in. My mother and I were laughing about something when we were leaving the school doors and out to her car to head home for the night when a lady stopped us. Now, I've seen this lady around my school, usually after hours, to clean and take out the trash. She was a janitor, and I never really thought about her deeply before until she stopped us that night. It was evident that she had special needs, and I don't mean that in a bad or degrading way. It was clear that she was excited to see me, and it was also clear that my mother was uneasy when she put her arm around my waist. "I know you. I used to babysit you when you were younger," she'd say. "Just a wee baby. I used to see you a couple of times a month. We were practically best friends." She even mentioned my name. To my knowledge, I had no idea who this woman was, at least personally. Immediately confused, and before I could say another word, my mom pushed me out the door and hastily walked to her car. She didn't say a word the whole ride home, and I didn't ask any questions. A few days passed, and I brought the situation up to my mom randomly. I could tell she was disturbed at the thought of it, but she ended up sitting me down and telling me the story of when she was looking to hire someone to babysit me. The lady I had met at the school that night had contacted Mom regarding her flyer. I guess they went to the same school, which happens to be the school I went to. And since we live in a very small and rural town, she knew where my mother had lived. When my mom respectfully declined, the lady got obsessive with her and I. She would call Mom every day, visit her at work, and even wait outside of her house to try and change her mind on hiring her. She would even write letters to my mom and stick them in the mailbox. It got to the point where one day my mom woke up from a nap to her sitting on the floor in the living room and playing with me as I laughed with glee. She stopped her story from there. I assumed that she had either moved, had a restraining order, or called the cops, maybe all three, but it really shook her up, and I think anyone can understand why. We don't know how she got in the house, or how long she knew how to get in, or even how long she'd been entering the house. All I know is that after that night, she stared at me while I had volleyball practice. Ever since I graduated high school, I haven't seen her. So, lady, whoever you are, let's not meet.
He was making human traps. I grew up on the countryside right next to a national park frequently visited by nature lovers and bird enthusiasts. It was the kind of park where you're not really allowed to bike or ride horses, only walk or run, but 10-year-old me felt it was a stupid rule and did so anyway, because the trails were perfect for it. I knew fully well that I wasn't supposed to do that and was caught a few times, but nothing much came of it apart from a half-hearted "don't do it again." And I did, of course, until one day, something frightening happened that made me stop. My family were horse breeders, and I would often take one of the horses for a ride, usually in the Forbidden Park. This day, very early morning, the first day of summer holiday, it was a beautiful outdoors. Misty and foggy, yet a sky that promised a sunny day ahead. Since it was so early before 6 o'clock, I knew there wouldn't be anyone on the trail to see me, so I let the horse set off full speed along the trail. I only slowed down on the part of the trail that got steep on one side, leading down to the river, because the thought of one step too close to the edge was too much even for a kid with next to non-existing risk assessment skills. Suddenly the horse came to a halt and refused to take another step. I grew up with horses all my life and knew that usually indicates that you need to investigate. Is there something with the hooves? Did the horse spot something that spooked it? The hooves were fine, but the horse didn't move an inch. And that's when I saw it. Someone has set up a trap. A thin, sharp metal wire across the trail, in perfect neck height for an adult. I stopped and looked around, but didn't see anyone. The wire was well attached to 2 trees and impossible for me to remove, so I led the horse around it, and to do so I had to walk up a bit up into the wooden area on the side of the trail. That's when I heard this singing. There was a song called Hey Tomte Gubor, and it was that melody, but the lyrics were different and sung in a muffled, sneering voice. Today I only remember parts of it, but translated it would have been something like, "Hey all you runners coming here passing, let the lifeblood pour out." I, as silently as I could, and with my heart in my throat, backed away, got up on the horse and hurried back the way I came as fast as I could. I knew I had to tell someone about it, but at the same time, wanted to avoid admitting to riding a huge and very forbidden horse on those protected trails. So now I had a problem. The old stories about a mad old man living in the shed in the woods, a shed that was once a cottage for the local hunter, came back to me as I hung on the horse for dear life. I got home, and I told my older brother what had happened, and he went back there with me in tow. We found the wire trap, and after a while of searching, we also found a spear-like pole in the ground, right on the spot where you'd land if you came running and jumped over the fallen tree on the trail. That's when we called the police. The area was searched and several similar traps found, but no sight of the old man. The following summer, though, there was a big news in the local paper about spear-like poles being found right under the water surface, directly under that little tower you're supposed to dive from at the lake, and black garbage bags filled with big rocks were found on the narrow bridge crossing the river, so that if a car had hit it, risk as it would have gone off the road and into the water.
Video recorded for nearly a year. Today, I found out from my own mother that her ex-boyfriend, the man I lived with from age 11 to 20, secretly videotaped my younger sister and myself in our own bedrooms, taking showers and baths, and even going so far as to sit on the roof and watch us through the skylight in our bathroom. I'm a 22-year-old female. My sister's 3 years younger. My mom left him when I was 20, around the same time I moved in with my boyfriend. The reason I moved in with my boyfriend was because my mom's boyfriend, Greg, had started to make me more and more uncomfortable. Now, Greg and I had known each other since I was 11, and had met him and had always gotten along fairly well. My mom went through a slew of boyfriends after divorcing my father when I was 4. By 11, I had already been to 3 different elementary schools and lived in 4 different houses, from living with my mom's boyfriends and it not working out. I was used to it. I was a quiet girl who liked to read and kept to herself, so I was always polite enough, knowing at some point or another either him or my mom would go off the deep end and I'd never see him again. My little sister hated Greg from the first day. Absolutely would not tolerate him. For the 9 years he was in our life, they'd have screaming matches almost every day. We should have listened to her innocent 8-year-old instincts, I suppose. But as I said, Greg and I got on fairly well, although he always did make me a little uncomfortable, just from certain instances here and there happening. When we first moved in with him, within a week he coincidentally lost his job. It took over a year before he got another one. My mom supported him for a year. Yet he was always giving her crap if her, my sister, or myself had a shopping day, or she gave me money when I was with friends. One time, he accidentally walked in on me when I was about 13, changing out of my bikini, after we all got home from the lake. Another time I was 14, I awoke to him and me in my sister's bedroom on Christmas Eve in the middle of the night, just staring at us. I confronted him the next day, and he chalked it up to saying he wanted to make sure we were asleep before Santa came. My little sis and I stopped believing in Santa years before, thanks to the older kids on the school bus. When I was 16 and had my first real boyfriend, Greg would absolutely terrorize him to the point he refused to come over to my house. Now, my real father is a cool cat who unfortunately had to deal with my mother in order to see us. She's selfish and crazy and played up the whole "I deserve my little girls over a man raising them" blah blah, but my father would shake hands with the boys I dated if they had a chance to meet, and treated them with respect unless given a real reason to dislike them. Greg would belittle them, get in their face, treat them all like they were asshole punks. I ended up dating the same guy for the last 3 years of high school, and Greg never once had anything nice to say about him. My boyfriend at the time thought it was because he was taller than Greg. I think the most memorable and prominent memory that really made me so uncomfortable I moved in with my boyfriend was Greg opening up to me. I was 19, just moved back home from college out of state after one semester, and it was that my mom hadn't fucked him in a year, and then moving closer to me when we were smoking a joint on the sun porch. There are a few more instances that happened, but basically, I lived with this guy for 9 years of my life. Through the hardest years of my life. Puberty, discovering my own body, dealing with the fact that 12 I was already a C-cup with a size 0 waist, learning to love my body and be comfortable with dealing with the horny boys my age always trying to mess with my head and heart just to be able to have a story in the locker room. Never mind discovering a supposedly father figure in my life was secretly watching me in intimate places I thought I had 100% privacy from the entire world in. I hadn't lived with him in 2 years, but I honestly felt so violated, and I'm still trying to cope with this bomb that has been dropped on the final year of my childhood. My little sister doesn't know, and I hope she never finds out. I'm furious my mom didn't do anything about it, other than leave him when she discovered the videos and files on his iPad. She initially told us she left because she kept catching him on teen pornography websites. That makes me wonder if he sold any of his videos of us to other pedophiles or uploaded them anywhere. I shudder at the thought. I guess he's involved in a pretty serious sexual harassment case at his work currently. He has a grown daughter of his own that seems to worship him. My friends have seen him out downtown at the bars with girls who are clearly old enough to drink but resemble 16-year-olds. I'm honestly just so confused and hurt and feel so violated. Apologies if this isn't the appropriate sub. I'm only on Reddit for Let's Not Meet and didn't want to post to any sexual abuse Reddit because I was never actually touched, and some people have gone through the actual hell. I'm fortunate enough to have been protected from the truth until I was 22 and in a stable place in my life that it most likely won't traumatize me for the rest of my life, or so I hope. I honestly am just so shocked. I feel like I'm just rambling now, because I legit just do not know how to feel about this. So many mixed emotions. So, Greg, let's never meet again, you pedo.
I was friends with a triple murderer. About 10 years ago, I studied abroad. I had a few friends in this new country and was glad to find a place to live with some cool people around my age. I started hanging with this crew, which became my friends, and we used to smoke a lot of weed. Things were sweet. There was one friend of my roommates, Frank, that came over to our place from time to time. I thought it was odd because he was like twice everybody's age. He was very intense as a person. It made me feel slightly uncomfortable. The first time I met him, he seemed extremely suspicious of me and would ask me all kinds of questions to suss me out. But he had a good sense of humor and would always crack great jokes. In a way, he was kind of charming, and my roommates seemed to love him. Also, he always brought pizza. I asked one of my friends what the deal was with this guy, and he was like, "Oh, you don't know? Last year he found his wife and brothers murdered in their flat. He's under investigation, but he didn't do it." I was taken back by this. How could they really know he didn't do it? And why did they want to hang around with a potential psycho? I gave it the benefit of the doubt, but I certainly saw Frank in a new light now. Time went, and Frank came by our place almost daily. He was very clever and sly, manipulative. I got to know more about his background. He used to be in a gang when he was my age. He had been in prison most of the time in between then and now for violence. This did not help me in trusting him. I couldn't believe how naive my roommates were to trust this man. The police went out and declared him as a suspect. By now, this had become the biggest investigation ever in that particular area. He was interrogated but released for lack of evidence. Back home at our place, he would sit and talk about how he was the victim of a conspiracy. And all my friends would nod and believe him. I felt crazy being the only one who didn't believe it. He must have sensed it because he took me outside and asked me if I believed him. I said yeah, sure I did, because by now I was starting to get really afraid of him. I asked him about the murders and he told me his version of the event where he, according to him, found the bodies. It was gruesome, but I still had doubts, and to my horror he would at other times crack jokes about the whole thing. Who in their right mind would joke about that? In my mind, only a complete psychopath. I started searching what a psychopath actually was and learned that this guy fit every classical definition. I freaked out because I couldn't figure out what he really wanted from us. I started getting paranoid and started believing that he actually planned on killing me and my roommates. I couldn't tell this to my roommates because they were fully blinded by this guy's charades and trusted him. At one point I started sleeping with a knife in my bed. That's how scared I was that he was going to come and murder us like he murdered those poor souls. This was a horrible time for me. On top of that, police had been tipped off about the relatively large amounts of weed being kept in the house and started raiding the place. 2 of my roommates were busted and this marked the breakup of our collective. The day I moved out, Frank helped me with my stuff and looked at me, menacingly as I always found him. "You're alright," he said. "I actually planned on killing you, but you're alright." I kid not. He told me this. The others would laugh it off as a joke, but I saw it very differently. I was very glad to leave after hanging out with this murderer on and off for 5 years. Frank would be arrested shortly after, starting a huge trial that lasted several years. I found some new friends and found back to some normality in my life. That's when I realized how fucked up my whole situation was. I had been isolated with all this and had no one else to go to. A year later, I was back in my home country and followed the trial. All the craziness that surfaced from this man during the trial would convince me that I was probably right all along. He was properly mental and was convicted to 4 life sentences. He will never be a free man again.